We got to talk about crypto for a moment or two because, boy, Bitcoin took us on a wild ride this week. And let me ask the first and most basic question. Does it matter? I mean, you have said on this program you think cryptocurrency is here to stay. Why is it here to stay, and what does it do for us?
Look, does it matter to the overall economy? Does it matter to the growth of standard of livings of Americans? Is it as important an issue as it is an issue that attracts media attention? No to all of those questions. Is there a desire, and is there a long-standing human desire to hold an asset that feels separate and apart from the day-to-day workings of governments? I think the answer to that question, history shows, is yes. I think gold has been the primary asset of that kind for a long time. And I think that crypto has a chance of becoming an agreed form that people who are looking for safety hold wealth in. So my guess is that crypto is here to stay, and probably here to stay as a kind of digital gold. And if you imagine that crypto became half or even a third of the total value of the non-use value of gold, that would be a substantial appreciation from current levels. And that's why I think there's a good prospect that crypto will be part of the system for quite a while to come. But is crypto going to usher in some kind of libertarian paradise? Are most of us going to be making most of our payments using Bitcoin or some other crypto asset? I rather doubt it. Is this going to be something fundamental for commerce on the internet? It may be an important part of commerce on the internet. That's how I would think about it.
Another thing that happened this week, before we get to inflation as such, is Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, went into the belly of the beast, if I could put it that way, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and said, you should be in favor of our plan that really has us taxing corporations more. And that's because you're actually going to make more money because of the overall investments we're making. You have a fascinating point about that, because we've also heard from President Biden he's trying to redistribute some of the wealth. You can't have it both ways, can you?
You know, I think the most important thing to say is that the administration is in broadly the right direction on corporate taxation. Corporations can afford to pay more, and instead of having a race to the bottom globally, we should be cooperating to make sure that people can't use havens to avoid taxes. And Secretary Yellen is right in the direction of her policy. Secretary Yellen is right, and I found it a powerful speech in her emphasis on there's a lot more that government needs to do in our society, and that fundamentally we need to rebalance a bit towards public investment, and maybe even more than a bit given the magnitude of climate and health and inequality challenges. I don't, in all honesty, think that the claim that somehow an increase in corporate taxes will be good for corporate profits is a valid claim. And I was surprised and a little disappointed to see that claim made. But the argument that it was supporting is, I think, a valid and strong argument. And that's probably where the focus should be.
Let me make a broader point, or really a question for you, Larry, here. We have seen in recent years an increase in concentration in U.S. corporations, larger and larger corporations, larger and larger market shares, and yes, much, much larger profitability rates. As a matter of economics, not morality, economics, is that good or bad or neutral for the economy?
You know, David, it depends. If a company comes to have lots of market power because it gets better and better at producing, and it can produce at lower and lower costs, that's good. That's what we call progress. That's what Henry Ford did with automobiles a long time ago. If a company is buying up its rivals, if a company is creating a fear that anyone who tries to innovate, they'll just get crushed, copied and crushed. That's really terrible for progress in the economy. And so I don't think you can generalize. I certainly share the view that we certainly haven't been making mistakes of too much antitrust policy in the United States over the last generation. And I think we can usefully look at stepped up antitrust policies in some cases. But I don't agree with those who seem to be suggesting, and I may be misreading some of the things that some of the people providing commentary say. If they're saying that whenever a company gets a larger market share and more profits, that's a problem that the government should go after, I think that's badly wrong. That's a situation the government should look at to see whether the competitive practices have been fair.
Laurie, let's get to the summer's inflation watch, as we call it here. This is something you've been talking about right from the very beginning of President Biden's administration, a concern that we might be pumping too much money in the economy. What's happened in the last week on that front from your perspective? What are you looking at?
You know, market judgments have stayed about constant. I think if you look at the run of commentary, there's a greater awareness of it. I read the Fed as being at the fringes, at the edges of growing awareness. I don't think the Fed is projecting in a way that reflects the potential seriousness of the problem. And I think that, you know, stopping and slowing an inflationary economy's inflation is a lot like bringing a car to a stop. It's going to be much more comfortable if you start early and gently than if you wait until the last possible moment. And so I am concerned that with everything that's going on, the economy may be a bit charging towards a wall. But I would say I'm not lots more concerned or lots less concerned than I was a week ago.
And we're starting to hear from at least some of the Fed members some concern. You heard from, for example, Rob Kaplan this week saying it's time to start easing our foot off the accelerator so we don't have to jump too hard on the brake if that time comes. But one of my questions is it more than just they're sort of not paying attention, they're not acting quickly enough, or could they be contributing to the problem through expectations? By signaling so strongly they're not going to actually taper, does that potentially actually feed the beast of inflation?
Look, I think it's a broad point. You have the Fed saying that it's a whole new world and we're a whole new Fed. You have the government saying it's a whole new type of policy back to the Great Society or the New Deal. Well, if you tell people it's a new world, they're probably going to be more reluctant to form expectations based on the old world. And so I don't understand how people can argue both that expectations are fundamentally anchored and that it's a new world. And so I think a little bit more emphasis on continuity would be a good idea. I think the Fed needs to recognize that it needs to be looking forward and driving the car through the windshield rather than the side windows. Looking at the side windows might have been fine a year ago or 2 years ago when they put forward their framework. But when you've got a government that's committing itself to 15% of GDP and fiscal stimulus, when the economy has a record level of job vacancies, that's not a time when you can steer the economy through the side window.
So, Larry, you've been watching Fed so closely for so many years. Just in the final 10 or 15 seconds here, do you think they're starting to change their direction?
I hope so. I really hope so, but I'm not altogether sure.